Afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our April 2025 Bite-Sized Corrosion series. And we're going to spend some time spotlighting corrosion failures. Joining me today, I'm delighted to welcome Prof. Rolf Mostert from the University of Pretoria. Rolf is passionate about understanding materials and structure failures, and he has a particular interest in environmental assisted cracking. So thank you for joining us, Rolf. And as we start our conversation, can we start with what exactly do you mean by environmentally assisted cracking?
Thank you for the invitation, Vanessa. So it's a very specific type of cracking that occurs only when three criteria are met at the same time. So you
Mhm.
need, on the one hand, susceptible material that's exposed to a critical environment. And then in addition, you need an applied tensile stress. And when these three conditions are required at the same time, a special type of cracking can occur. And what is quite dangerous about EAC or environmentally assisted cracking is that the cracking can occur at levels of stress where you would normally not expect any cracking to occur. So it could occur at levels of stress way down below the design stress, for instance.
So I guess that is different stress from the stress of students just before they write your exams, and those of us in industry where there's just too much to do and too little time to do it in. But when you're looking at this stress, do you envisage the stresses that you anticipate, or can there also be stresses that were not even considered in the design?
Yeah, I like the example of the human experience of stress, and I also explain the aspect of stress and loads to my students in along the same terms. And it's important for them to understand the difference between loads on the one hand and stresses on the other. And what I normally say is that, loads are something that is imposed onto you as a student by other parties, such as the lecturer, for instance. So the lecture load or the study loads we impose as lecturers, but the internal experience of the loads would in fact be the stress. So in a engineering component, it's more or less the same situation. We've got, say, a bolt, and this bolt is loaded, but the stress is the reaction inside the material to the applied load. And sometimes there are stresses due to objects being suspended from, say, a crane of sorts. And other times it's a self-loading situation. For instance, with regard to the bolt example, when the bolt is torqued up, torquing stretches the shaft of the bolt, and therefore the bolt shaft is under stress.
Stress. Okay, so let's not tighten any bolts. And you've just mentioned bolts, and I presume that bolts can be affected by this EAC in terms of their failure.
Yes, very much so. And I was involved in quite an interesting but also consequential situation that arose during construction of one of the power stations where exactly this happened. All right, so this is a structure that consists of a number of beams, and there are connection points. The connection points are shown with the red circles.
Mhm.
And this entire structure is about 40 meters high or so, and it supports that massive fan that you see on the right-hand side,
Okay.
a number of such fans. So within the red circles are the connection points, and each of these little dots there are M24 bolt. M24 bolt's quite a
Quite a
substantial
big
bolt.
bolt. Yes.
25 millimeter diameter, and these fasteners, as we refer to the combination of the bolt and the nut, are then tensioned in place. Together they keep the structure in place. In this case, it was high strength bolts, fully galvanized, hot galvanized. And after the installation, which you see there, everything appeared to be fine. But then after a period of a month or so, one or two of these bolts were found in the fractured state on the ground.
Okay.
And this happened more and more over the time after that. And when a substantial number of these bolts essentially rained down from up high, it was realized that something was substantially wrong here.
What comes to mind is not raining cats and dogs, but raining nuts and bolts.
Exactly. So this is now what was observed after fracture of the bolt. So this is now putting the the bolt back together again. So you can see the crack there underneath the head, the black crack underneath the head. So the shaft of these bolts were often covered with so-called white rust. And white rust is also quite evident in this photograph. But you can see that the head is still nice and shiny, as a galvanized bolt should be.
Mm-hmm.
The bit of the bolt sticking out was covered with red rust.
Mm.
And a number of bolts were then, removed from the structure, and you can see the white rust quite prominent in the bolt right up front here, but not all of them had
I see
this
that,
white
yeah.
rust. So there was quite an investigation into the root cause of this fracture, this delayed fracture, and a number of parties investigated in detail from various angles. But it was found eventually that the white rust, which is normally quite a normal thing to happen on zinc, occurred within the bolt holes. Now, the bolt holes were those holes that were drilled to accommodate the bolts, in place in these steel beams. And conditions were ideal for the development of the white rust within these bolt holes. And normally, as I said, one would simply wipe off the white rust, not worry too much about it. But in this case, the white rust process developed one of the three aspects that we need for environmentally assisted cracking, that of hydrogen. So the process of corrosion that occurred within the bolt hole developed corrosion and hydrogen associated with it. And the other two requirements for environmentally assisted cracking was then found to be in place. The one is the susceptible material. So because this material was a high strength, so-called grade 10.9 bolt, it was found that it was susceptible, and the aspect of the applied load and the internal stresses are obviously there. In this case, we had these three requirements, and we had a classic case of hydrogen-assisted cracking that occurred over time, that required time to occur, and that resulted in the failures.
Now, Rolf, I'm just thinking about this. This can't have been the only structure ever put together with nuts and bolts. I mean, that goes without saying. And yet we don't hear of structures falling down as a result of this. So is this a particularly unusual scenario of the fasteners that were selected, or was there a backstory, or should I be very careful now when walking under structures?
The investigation showed that the reason for this particular case was that within the grade 10.9 specification, there is a region that is dangerous regarding susceptibility. And the overseas members of the team, we had investigators from the Technical University in Darmstadt in Germany. They were familiar with this type of issue. And in Germany, they have developed internal standards and the like, which ensured that this dangerous susceptibility region was not entered into when producing grade 10.9 volts.
Oh.
You need all three of these aspects for the cracking to happen. Without the susceptibility, the problem went away, essentially.
Okay.
So the solution was then to replace these bolts with bolts that were not susceptible. And it was proven in the labs in Germany that, these particular bolts were susceptible, and that placement bolts from Germany were not susceptible.
That's so interesting. And I imagine this retrofit must have been quite a challenge. If you're talking 40 meters in the air, you're talking not easy access and presumably high expense.
Yes. So all of the bolts had to be removed by rope access and replaced then with the imported bolts. Obviously, time was at a premium because it's part of a construction project, and the impact of the lost time was also quite costly, but very thankful that nobody was injured as a result of this occurrence.
Yeah, that really is almost a miracle, because if you're thinking about falling nuts and bolts, you pretty much don't have time. And I guess it reiterates why one wears a hard hat on site. Rolf, that's a fascinating example that you've given us. And I know that when we were preparing to come on air, you mentioned that sometimes this EAC failure can be almost anticipated or even watched in process, but resolved before there's a catastrophe. So can you talk us through how that can happen?
Yes, I was involved in such a case where a stress corrosion cracking mechanism was discovered on welded storage tanks.
Okay.
And stress corrosion cracking is one of the subtypes of EAC or
Mhm.
environmentally assisted cracking. And it's quite an interesting investigation where we were able to track the degradation rates and evaluate the rates at which this degradation was taking place before any serious negative consequences came about. Right, so this is typical of a storage tank. It's not
Mhm.
a tank in question. The tank in question was something like 60 meters diameter and
Wow.
20 meters high. But what you can see in this image is you can see the well bead runs,
Mhm.
horizontally, and then there are also vertical runs. So these welded joints keep a structure such as the tank, together.
Mm.
And therefore, if cracks develop next to these welds, and if fracture of those welds would occur, one has a potentially catastrophic situation. You have a sudden rupture of the tank that could happen, and you also have the environmental aspect of the spillage of the tank contents. So, to
Mm.
prevent this type of occurrence in susceptible materials, regular inspection programs then
Wow.
survey the welds in particular to check for cracking, and was doing such a regular routine inspection in a certain case that cracks were picked up. And the cracks were adjacent to the welds, and they were sized, and there was the exact length and depth of the
Right.
cracks were then established. So in that case, the next question is, now we've got cracks, and how serious are these cracks, and what is the so-called prognosis, to use a common or medical term?
Yes.
And we then continued to calculate the critical crack length. So we've got an existing crack length at this point. We know what it is, but the question is, what is the critical crack length?
Right.
So, due to the internal contents of the tank, there's stress acting on the cracks.
Mm.
You've got, in this case, again, a susceptible material, and you've got an environment within the tank which is critical and it can cause the cracking. In the next slide, I show, where we calculated these critical crack sizes and we compared
Mhm.
the existing crack size to that line. So the critical crack size depends on two parameters: the crack depth
Mhm.
and the crack length.
Okay.
So the deeper the crack depth, the shorter length you can tolerate, and
Mhm.
vice versa. So that blue line here was in the calculated line for the critical crack size. And then the triangle was the existing crack dimensions,
Mhm.
worst case. So the question that now arose is, with the stress corrosion cracking mechanism in place, what time will we take for that crack to grow to the critical size? And if one knew that answer, then one could mitigate the cracking mechanism. You can get your planning in place for replacement or other mitigation measures. That was a challenge in this project, is in to establish that cracking rate.
So how did you do it, if I can ask?
Yeah, so it was a sample similar to the one that I'm holding in my hand now, and we've got a schematic. So it's a fairly small sample, as you can see. And the next figure I gave you is a schematic of this, and perhaps that will explain the
Yeah.
mechanism a bit better. But these samples were machined from the same material. There you
Right.
can see on the left-hand
Mm.
side the same sample. And the sample is then one where in the labs we then put in as artificial fatigue pre-crack.
Okay.
But this crack tip that you see there
Mm.
is exactly the same type of tip that you would get with any other crack. So in the lab, we could now get the crack, in the material, same material as that of the shell of the tanks. And with this particular mechanism, again, a bolt was involved. But as you open that gap, you can measure the exact opening. And
Mhm.
as you open that gap on the right-hand side, that COD stands for crack opening displacement. As you open the gap in the lab again now, you can apply a particular load to the crack
Okay.
tip. So we had a number of these samples machined
Mhm.
and pre-cracked, and then stressed to various loads, and they were immersed in the tank.
Okay, so you
So
put them into the actual tank itself to be under the live conditions.
yes, so we went, on a bit of a, call it a fishing expedition. We tied wire to these samples, and they were suspended at particular depths below the liquid level. So then after predetermined periods, we then extracted the samples and fractured them in the lab. So this is now an example of that fatigue pre-crack that now grows with a stress corrosion cracking mechanism after 13,000 hours. So the dark, area indicated there with a yellow arrow is now the stress corrosion cracking that grew in 13,000 hours by 1.38 millimeter. So a great number of these tests were performed, and we could then determine the crack growth rate as a function of the applied stress. And the next slide summarizes the findings. The tests then continued for very, quite substantial periods, and the finding was that the crack growth rates were then dependent also on time, and there was also the difference in the crack growth rates between the samples that were fully immersed. And some samples were inserted in the zone of the tank where, due to the level change in the tank on the inside, were sometimes dry and sometimes wet.
Right.
So this alternated drying and wetting then also was a variable we found, and that gave rise to different growth rates. So using this information, one could then establish remaining life for different portions in the tank. And normally in a case like this, you then have a belts and braces approach where you then also double check what is happening to the crack depth by tests from time to time, doing on-site testing. And one could then stretch the life of the tank quite considerably in this way without any failures, any leaks happening.
That's so interesting. Did you ever fear that there would be a real life failure before you sort of grasp the crack growth rate? Or were you confident that you were going to be able to do planned maintenance within an adequate time?
Yeah, I think due to the strategy followed, where we first established the critical crack size that would result in trouble, in fractures, and then thereafter kept on monitoring the cracks in place while we were able to do the lab testing. By combining those three aspects, again, in parallel, we were quite sure that we used the best possible approach to safety and ensuring that nothing untoward would happen.
Excellent. And I'm presuming that at this stage, the tank has been repaired or replaced or fixed, and we're not going to have another disaster like that.
Yeah, so in fact, the best solution was found to be coatings. And localized application of coatings were found to be quite successful and stopped the growth entirely.
Okay, that's fantastic, because that's a relatively inexpensive solution to what could have been a catastrophic problem.
Indeed it was.
That's fascinating. Wow, well, thank you. Has this research and this particular scenario changed the approach in the construction of these tanks, or is coating the bottom strakes becoming a routine scenario in these applications? Do you know?
Yeah, so in this particular environment, so the cracking is environment sensitive. In other environments, you wouldn't get the cracking, but in this particular environment with this particular client as well, all the tanks have now been coated, and new tanks going into this environment are also coated. They coated along the weld lines because it was found that the residual stress from the welds were a substantial part of the loading on the material that causes the cracking. And it's only needed then to cover those areas with the high residual stresses next to the welds. And that's being done, as common action now for this particular client.
Wow. Well, thank you, Rolf. This has been such an interesting discussion. Our time has flown, but thank you for highlighting for us how, by using a practical research in situ and getting a better understanding of the corrosion failure mechanisms, we can actually change how we do things. I think it's really encouraging to see that there are solutions that can happen before we have corrosion failures. So thank you for enlightening us. And thank you too for our viewers. We hope that you feel that you're leaving today as though you've benefited from our discussion. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.